Hi, and welcome back to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean Hardy, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor based here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to helping you understand and apply the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. So whether you're a therapist, a client, a student, or someone who's looking to live more mindfully and with purpose, this channel is for you. Now, this video is the second in our series based on the book Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, 100 Key Points and Techniques. Today, we're going to step further by diving into one of the most powerful and misunderstood elements of ACT, Relational Frame Theory, or RFT for short. RFT explains how human language and cognition work, not just as tools for communication, but as processes that shape our emotions, our learning, and even our suffering. This video will give you a clear, non-technical introduction to RFT and how it connects directly to the work we do in ACT. So if you ever wonder why clients get so tangled in thoughts, or why trying to just change your thinking often backfires, this is the missing piece. So let's get started. In the first video of this series, we explore the foundations of behavior, how reinforcement, avoidance, and environmental contexts shape what people do. But there's something else shaping our behavior every second of the day, and that's language. Relational Frame Theory, or RFT, is the behavioral science behind human language and cognition. It helps explain how we learn, how we suffer, and how we get stuck, not just by what we experience, but by how we relate to our experiences. At its core, RFT is about how we connect ideas, experiences, and words. For example, try linking two random items together, a piano and a grapefruit. What do they have in common? Maybe you thought of color, shape, or sound. Or maybe you notice how completely unrelated they are. Either way, your brain forms a relationship, and that's the heart of RFT, the ability to relate anything to anything. This process begins in infancy and becomes second nature. We learn that certain sounds, like apple, refer to specific things in our environment. Over time, we can combine ideas, create categories, imagine futures, reflect on the past, and compare ourselves to others. We don't just respond to what's physically present. We respond to symbols and stories about those things. That ability has helped humans build language, art, technology, and entire civilizations. But it also means we're not just reacting to life. We're reacting to our thoughts about life. And that's where things get tricky. Once we start relating things symbolically, it becomes our dominant way of learning. Imagine a child named Charlie, who hears about his cousin Mabel, who was bitten by a small dog. He wasn't there. He just heard about it later. Later, Charlie is invited to a friend's house where there's a big dog. Even though he's never experienced a bad experience with any dog, Charlie feels anxious and avoids the visit. Why? Because his mind linked dog with pain, and then big dog with even more pain. Charlie isn't reacting to reality. He's reacting to relationships between words and ideas that have been reinforced by language. This kind of learning is called arbitrarily applicable derived relational responding. And it sounds complex, but it simply means that we can make connections between things based on language and not just direct experience. It's what makes human learning so fast and flexible, but also means we can become afraid of things we've never encountered. We can avoid joy, love, or risk because of something we heard, imagined, or remembered. And we do this automatically without needing any formal training. That's why in ACT, we're less concerned with what a client thinks and more focused on how they relate to their thoughts. Because often the problem isn't the content, it's the fusion between symbols and meaning. Human language isn't just about labeling. We relate things in dozens of complex ways, and each type of relationship influences how we think, feel, and behave. Let's walk through a few of the most important types of relational frames that we see in therapy. The first is coordination relations. This is when we learn that one thing is the same as another. For example, a child learns that this is a cat, and later they can reverse that. A cat is this. If they also learn that a cat is a mammal and a mammal is an animal, they can derive that a cat is an animal. That's combinatorial entailment, connecting multiple relations without direct instructions. This is how complex belief systems and self-stories develop. The next is distinction relations. We also learn to tell things apart. That's not me. This is different. You're there. I'm here. These frames help us build a sense of self and others, but they also support comparisons, judgments, and separations. Sometimes helpful, sometimes painful. The next is temporal relations. We relate events across time. If I do this, then this will happen. This allows us to plan and predict, but also to worry and ruminate. A past embarrassment or a feared future can control our behavior today, even though they aren't happening right now. The next is hierarchical relations. We place things in categories. Apples and oranges are fruit, or act as part of CBT. This helps us make sense of the world, but it also means that we can get tangled in identity labels. I failed at something could turn into I'm a failure. The next is dyadic relations. These are perspective-based. I, you, here and there, that, now, then. They form what ACT calls the here-now center of consciousness. It's how we experience ourselves as observers, but it also means we interpret events through a personal lens. My fear, my pain, my past, even when other perspectives could offer more clarity. Each of these relational frames contribute to how clients interpret their world. And the more fused they are with these frames, the harder it becomes to shift their behavior in flexible, values-based ways. If you're confused, just rewind and watch that again, or watch this video and come back here. Here's where RFT gets really interesting and highly relevant to therapy. When we relate two things through language, they begin to share functions, even if one of them had no emotional weight at all before. For example, imagine someone gets food poisoning after eating a mango. Later, just hearing the word mango makes them queasy. Then a month later, they see a mango-scented candle in a store and feel sick again. That candle didn't make them sick, but through relational learning, the function of mango has transformed the meaning of candle. This is called the transformation of stimulus functions. It means that once we create a verbal link between experiences, thoughts, or objects, the emotional function of one can influence the other. This is how trauma triggers work. It's why certain smells, sounds, or even places can evoke intense emotion, because they've been brought into a relational network with painful events. The mind says, this reminds me of that, and the body reacts as if it is that. In ACT, we don't try to untangle every thread in the network. Instead, we help people relate differently to the entire process. We bring awareness to the transformation and then invite flexibility in how they respond, or we change the transformation of function altogether through interventions. Human beings crave coherence. We want our stories to make sense, even if that story is painful. Let's say someone believes, I'm not lovable. That belief may have started early in life, but over time, the mind collects evidence to support it. Failed relationships, moments of rejection, even innocent miscommunications. And because our brains are built to favor consistency, we filter new experiences to match what we already believe. This is called rule coherence, where behavior is guided by a story, not by what's actually happening in the moment. It can be incredibly limiting. A client might avoid intimacy, not because they don't want love, but because love contradicts the story they spent years reinforcing. Coherence wins, even if it means suffering continues. In ACT, we gently challenge this process by noticing the story, holding it lightly, and asking, is this story helping you build the life you want? Not, is it true? But is it workable? This shift from coherence to workability is what makes ACT so different from traditional cognitive approaches. We don't try to prove the mind is wrong. We help people see that their mind might be giving them a story that no longer serves their values. Language is what makes us human. It allows us to build civilizations, write poetry, create science, and connect deeply with one another. It's also the engine behind our greatest emotional suffering. Unlike other animals, we can think about the future, recall the past, compare ourselves to others, and evaluate our worth. And because of RFT, these thoughts feel real and immediate, even when they're abstract. A dog might experience hunger or threat, but it doesn't worry about tomorrow or replay last week's mistakes. We do that constantly. We're not just experiencing life, we're narrating it, interpreting it, judging it. This is why language can be both a gift and a curse. ACT helps clients develop awareness of this paradox. Instead of getting caught up in the mind's story, we learn to observe them with curiosity. Instead of fighting with the thoughts, we practice holding them more gently. We don't aim to stop language. That's impossible. But we can change how we respond to it. And that change opens the door to freedom, not just from thoughts, but from their grip. One of the most persistent tricks the human mind plays is the illusion that we can control our inner world. Our thoughts, feelings, memories, and urges, if we just try hard enough. And for a while, it seems to work. If I avoid thinking about an awkward conversation, the discomfort fades. If I stay busy, maybe I won't be so sad. But over time, the more we try to control or suppress our difficult experiences, the more power that they seem to have. The mind is a master problem solver. But when it applies problem solving to emotions, trying to eliminate, suppress, or fight them, it often backfires. That's because internal experiences don't follow the same rules as external problems. You can't logic your way out of heartbreak. You can't organize your way out of anxiety. Trying to do so creates the illusion that control is possible. And if you just find the right trick, you'll finally feel better. This is the emotional equivalent of chasing your own shadow. ACT helps people to let go of this exhausting pursuit, not by giving up, but by choosing a different relationship to pain. Experiential avoidance is the attempt to get rid of unwanted private experiences, even when doing so causes harm or pulls us away from our values. This might look like avoiding social events to escape anxiety, drinking to numb grief, or even scrolling endlessly to escape boredom. The short-term effect is relief. The long-term consequences is disconnection. And it's not just bad feelings we avoid. People often avoid joy or intimacy or excitement because those feelings make them feel vulnerable. The more we try to avoid, though, the narrower our life becomes. Instead of living, we manage. In ACT, we validate the impulse to avoid. Of course, we want relief. But we also ask, what is avoidance costing you? And what would you do if this pain wasn't in charge? The goal isn't to eliminate avoidance, but to build willingness so people can open up to discomfort in the service of something more meaningful. Cognitive fusion is what happens when we become entangled with our thoughts, so much so that we treat them as absolute truth, rules to follow or threats to obey. For example, a thought like, "I'm a failure," stops being just a sentence and becomes a fact. A passing worry like, "they're going to reject me," becomes a reason to cancel plans. In fusion, the thought and the thinker merge. This is the natural result of relational learning. When we relate symbols to real events, they start to carry the same weight. Saying, "I'm disgusting," can feel just as real as hearing someone else say it to us. In ACT, we don't argue with thoughts. We practice diffusion, learning to step back and notice thoughts as thoughts. That might mean saying them in a silly voice, singing them out loud, or watching them float by like a cloud. The point isn't to get rid of the thought, but to unhook from it. When you see a thought as a passing event in the mind, not as a command, you regain the power to choose your next step. Human beings don't just learn from consequences, we also learn from rules. A rule is a statement that links behavior to outcomes, like if you study, you'll pass, or if you cry, people will leave. Rules can be helpful when they align with reality, but they can become problematic when they disconnect us from the present moment, or when they persist despite being unworkable. For instance, the person might avoid intimacy because they've internalized the rule, if you get too close, you'll get hurt. That rule may have protected them once, but now it keeps them stuck. Rule-governed behavior can override direct experience. Even when someone is safe, loved, and supported, they may act as if they're still in danger because the rule says so. In ACT, we help people become aware of these internal rules and assess them not based on the truth, but on the workability. Is this rule helping you build a rich and meaningful life? If not, we create space to write a new one. Thanks for watching this in-depth look at relational frame theory and how language shapes our behavior, our suffering, and our healing. If this video helped clarify some of the big questions that you've had about ACT, or maybe gave you some new tools to use in therapy or as a client, please like, subscribe, and share. It really means a lot to me and helps grow this channel to reach other people who want to learn ACT. In the next video, we'll shift from theory to application as we explore the key processes in ACT, starting with the core concept of psychological flexibility, and then the 6 processes that help people live with purpose, even in the face of pain. Thanks again for being a part of ACT on Mental Health, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember, your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.